Hey everybody, this is John again, and it's been a while since I've done any videos, but I'm back in the saddle again. About a month ago I did a video featuring a mini balanced leech, and one of the viewers asked if I use this in rivers. And no, I do not use this balanced leech in the rivers, because these beads right here tend to get hung up in rocks really bad. They also pick up a lot of grass and a lot of weeds. So I wanted to demonstrate a couple, not just one, but two very simple leech patterns for using in rivers. And these are both for different situations. The one I've got in the vise is just on a hook, and it's not weighted. And it's used for riding very loosely in the water column. And I normally use it when the water is really shallow, or as the last fly in a nymphing rig, because without the weight it just kind of waves around in the current, and it's very enticing to fish, especially with this pine squirrel. And the other one is a jig version, and we will get to that one in a minute. I just want to get started here real quick and show you this one. Now, I do like to tie these in a lot of different colors. Olive is one of my favorites for rivers that have a lot of moss, like a lot of tailwaters, like the Bighorn down near Fort Smith. This has been really good for me, and it's really good after a flow change, especially a bump upwards in the flow, because leeches, worms, things like that will become dislodged when they bump up the flows, and then you'll find a lot more of them in the current, and the fish tend to key on them when they see them. Now, this olive one, I like to use a contrasting thread, and this olive one, I'm going to use a light olive, which is almost a yellow sheen, and I'm tying this on a Mustad S80 hook. And I like this hook because it's got some weight. It is 3x strong, and it's got a micro barb, which is real easy to pinch down, and I have never had one of these break when pinching the barb like you do with a hook with a larger barb. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pine squirrel, and this is just a standard olive color, and I'm going to measure on my little scale. I'm going to dampen that so I can pull that fur back and I can see how long this is going to be. And I'm going to measure from the end of that fur, not counting just a little bit of the tip, and I'm going to get about 1.25 inches, and that's from right here to right where I've parted the fur. And then I'm just going to take this and hold it right so that part is right over where my thread is hanging, and I'm going to kind of lean the strip towards me and just loop that thread right over that part. I'm going to get 3 wraps, maybe a 4th on this one, and just kind of make sure that's still sitting up on top, and it is. Now we're just going to fold that back. I'm going to hold everything out of the way, and now I just want to cover the hook shank with my thread completely, and I'm going to stop about half of a hook eye length behind the back of the hook eye. Fold my strip forward. Again, this is a micro pine squirrel strip, and I'm going to part the fur right where my thread is hanging. Now again, I'm going to roll that towards me, because when I pull the thread over, it's going to want to make it walk. And that one walked quite a bit. So I'm going to try it again. Rotate this just a little bit more my way. There we go. and let that thread torque pull it right up on top. And again, I'm going to take 2 or 3 more wraps right there just to secure it. And now I'm going to bring my thread, once I've folded that strip backwards, right up behind the eye. Then I'm going to take this strip and just wrap it, pulling the fur back, wrap it around once, and this wrap is right on top of where that was secured with our thread. And then as I come around with this next wrap, I'm going to bring it just forward of that. Now that fur is going to kind of separate as you bring it around, but I put a little moisture on there to help that. Now I'm just going to bring my thread in here, catch it, a couple of wraps, pull that strip and all the other loose fur back, get a couple of wraps there, and that's got that completely secured. And then I'm just going to trim it. Now, using a little bit of moisture, I'm going to stroke everything back there and just whip finish right on top of that and build a slightly tapered head. And that's it. I'm going to cut that, and I do like to put just a drop is all it takes of head cement. Just a small little drop right on the thread, just to keep it from unraveling. And that's it for that one. That is, you see, a very simple fly, easy to tie, and I'm using these micro pine squirrel strips. And again, I do this in a lot of different colors: black, brown, rust, olive, and natural. I especially like the natural if I find worms, annelids, in the water column, because it really imitates them very well. So the next one, now this is a weighted one, and this one is really good for getting down deep right on the bottom. The hook I'm using is the U650BL barbless, and this is a Umpqua hook, and I'm doing this one in size 14. The bead is a slotted tungsten 3mm. Now when you put that bead on there, you want to make sure you put your hook through the small hole on the bead. Slide it all the way forward and then rotate it so the slot is toward the bottom. And I'll let you see what I'm talking about there. If the slot was on top, you get a look like that. But with the slot on the bottom, what you're going to see is, if I can get it to do that, there we go, right there. And you can see the bead is still right up against the eye of the hook. Now I want to lock that in place before I get going. And on this one, I'm going to do this in black, and I like the red as a little accent, so I'm going to use red thread. And I'm going to start back here, right about just behind the hook point. Get my thread started, break it off, and now I'm going to wrap this thread. You can see my wraps are not quite touching there. There's a slight gap, and that is so this lead will secure a little bit better. And I've got a 0.025 lead wire. Now this is going to do 3 things for us. Number 1, it's going to lock the bead in place. Number 2, it's going to help level out the body. And number 3, it's going to add just a touch more weight. And I saw this little trick in another video online, and I thought that is really cool. Started using it, and I really love it. So you just take that thread and shove it right in there, in that small gap on top, very securely, and then just lock it in place. Now, if you're tying a bigger fly and you want to add more weight, that's a good way to start your lead, and then you can wrap it around the shank, you know, cut it to length, and then cover it up with your thread wraps however you want to. On this fly, we just want the tiniest little bit of weight, and we more than anything want to secure the bead and give us a level working surface when we build the body. And I'm going to do that by building a small step right off the end of that lead wire. And then we are going to bring the thread back to the end of the shank, and then I'm going to bring it right up, not quite all the way to the lead, but pretty close. Now I'm going to take my zonker strip here, and I've actually got two, so let's separate those and determine which way the hair is flowing, because the hair lays from the front to the back on the squirrel when it's live, and once it's tanned it still does that. So I've determined that it's pointing backwards. Now what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to moisten that a little bit with my fingers. Then I'm going to measure, this time I want to measure 1 inch along the leather side, a full inch, and part the fur at that point. There you go. It just needs a little bit of moisture to get the part. And now I'm just going to take and cut right at that part. And that's going to leave me with a nice little strip right there. Now I'm going to brush the fur on the front up just a little bit and then clip about 1/8, maybe just a little more than 1/8 of an inch of the fur off. I don't like to pull it because that leather can be a little bit delicate, and you can weaken it by pulling the top surface of the leather off. So I like to trim it. And the reason we're going to trim it is because we're going to use that as our tie down point, and it's going to be a lot more secure when tied in this way. Now again, the thread torque is going to cause that to rotate around the hook just a little bit as we compress it. So I'm going to rotate it towards me on my side of the hook, then bring the thread around, and you can see that pulled that right up on top. I want to secure that there, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm rolling the leather side towards me and rotating it onto my side of the shank all the way back as far as I'm securing it, and that keeps it from walking on me. Now I'm going to bring this about halfway forward, and we're going to flip this upside down. Now I need another attachment to do the body. So where I have groomed that hair forward, or fur forward, I am going to go ahead and do the same little trim, only this time I'm going to get a little bit more. I'm going to get about 1/4 of an inch. There we go. Now I'm going to turn that backwards and upside down. Wait a minute, there we go. Alright, now, so this fur is pointing towards the back of the hook, but it's actually, if we groom it natural, it's going to be going forward. I've got my little trim. I'm going to pull that back, and I want the fur to stand up whenever we secure it, so I'm going to flip it upside down. And I'm going to do the same thing here, where I think I can show you this with it that way. You can see as I pulled that, let me do that again, I think I can give you a better view. As I pull that thread around there, let me get a better control over it. There we go. It pulls that strip up on top. Now it walked a little too far, so I'm just going to take my thumbnail, push it back around, get it lined up. Let me get it around here where I can see it. There we go. And now I'm just going to counteract the thread torque a little bit. There we go. Now you can see when I'm done wrapping, I have a teeny tiny little gap there that has no fur on it. But that's okay, because when this fur lays down, it's going to cover that up. And I want to make sure that I have this completely secure. Now I'm just going to cover that. And I'm going to come up in here. And then there we go. Make kind of a smooth body. It doesn't have to be ultra smooth, because we're going to build the same kind of collar on this that we did on the unweighted leech. Again, I'm going to use a little moisture. Separate the fur. Let me get that around there where I can see it. And you can see there's not much length on the body. And I'm pulling this around on my side again, and then letting the thread torque pull it up on top. Now I can just, with pressure on my bobbin, I can just work that right up on top. And I'm going to get 3 more wraps. Now I'm going to invert the vice jaws and pull that strip back. Make a few wraps right behind the bead. Now I want to take this pine squirrel, and it doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. I spun it the wrong way. And I want to spin it. Okay, let's try this again. Now, there were a couple things I didn't like about that body and that collar, and rather than reshooting the whole thing and kind of editing that out where you'll never see it, I wanted to just leave those in there to show you how to make this fly a little bit more precise. So I've already got the tail tied in, I've got the lead covered up, and I've got the body kind of smoothed out. And I'm just going to bring my thread back up here just behind the point of the hook, and then rotate it with the point up. Now I've got the strip that I had cut off, and you can see it's still groomed back from the moisture that I used where I made the split to create the tail, to tie it in and create it. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did, but I'm just going to, the natural growth of the hair is going opposite of the way I've got it groomed right now. But I'm going to take and just do the same thing and clip a little bit out, not a whole lot, just a little bit. And then take that, turn it upside down, put it into position, and I'm looking so that I want to get, I don't want that gap between the strip where the fur's been cut off and where the fur restarts. I want that fur actually to go all the way to our tail tie-in point. I want to get it right up on top of the hook point before I continue securing it. I'm going to pull that back and look at it, and yeah, I'm going to get it just right as I wrap this thing back. I'm going to wrap my thread back to the point where we had the tail tied on. Be careful and don't work your tail around to the side of the hook. And get that really secured, and then just cover up that strip. And you can see that leaves a little bit of a bump right there where that strip ends that I just tied in for the body. That's okay. We're going to cover that up. We're going to fold this back over, and that's going to cover that up. Now, if you're worried about that, you can build it up. And there's a couple things you can do. If you want to add a little flash in there, you can add some UV red, which is the color I like. You can use red, purple, or black, whatever, yellow, whatever floats your boat. And you can add some flash to the center of the fly so that it winks as that fly pulses to the water, or you can just leave it thread, which is what I normally do, but I'm going to show you how. I just add a little bit of flash to that, and it's not a whole lot. I'm just building a really small noodle there, and I don't even care about covering up the whole body in a nice even layer. just, like I said, it's just a wink is all I want. I don't want it to be like super duper flashy. If I was going to do that, then I would put something on the outside. I'll show you another spot here at the end where we can add a little bit more flash. I just want to put a touch more in there so it's going all the way up to where I am going to tie the body down. There we go. Alright, now this is where I am going to tie down the body. I'm just going to fold that over. Now last time when I did this, I did it and I tied it in with it on my side of the hook, on this side of the bead. And what that does is it creates problems when you go to wrap the collar. So I'm going to show you what I didn't last time. It's been a while since I've tied these things, and sometimes these little tricks just don't come to you right off. So I'm going to part that right where my thread is hanging. There we go. And I've got it laid on my side of the hook, but now I've got a gap. I'm going to put my thumbnail down there, pinch that in place right up on top, and come around with my thread and then cinch it down, and that pulls it right up on top. I'm going to put just a little bit of moisture on these things so the fur doesn't get caught up. I don't normally have this much trouble when I'm not trying to demonstrate it, but there you go. Here we go. Okay, now I'm going to make a couple more wraps right here. Then I'm going to lift that strip up and come right up here behind the bead. Now, I'm going to take this, and with that strip right up on top, when I pull on it and start to rotate it, now the leather side goes right up against the hook shank. So I'm going to start off by rotating the vise, get it upside down because that's where we're going to tie it off, and then wrap that collar 1.5 turns. And the half turn comes when you get right back up on top with the hook point down. I'll lock that in place. I get a little moisture on here. This thing is just so... We've got very little humidity today, and it's kind of static, so that fur is just flying everywhere. There we go. I'm going to give it a couple more wraps. Now it's secured in there really tightly. I'm going to give it one in front. That'll help continue to lock it down. Trim that off. Get everything back, and then just kind of fill that gap a little bit. Now here's the other place you can add flash if you want to. As you can see, that flash on the hook shank is not going to be all that visible. It's just going to be kind of a wink. But if you want a little bit of flash that's more visible, I'm going to use again my little UV red ice dub. And I'm going to build just a small little collar right here, right at the front of the body, between the body and the bead. I don't want it too bulky, but if you're going to put it on there, make sure that you've got enough that it's going to do what you want it to do, and that's add a little bit of bulk and flash. Just about 2.5 wraps, and then I'm going to come back around and catch that last wrap of the noodle with my thread a couple of times, and then do my whip finish. And I find that the dubbing in that whip finish locks that thing down to where you don't need any kind of head cement on there. It will not unravel. Now as you fish this thing, I'll show you with my little brush here, this ice dub tends to work itself out, and so you get a little bit of flash flowing back into the collar, and you can see that's pretty exciting. If you want to do that before you fish the fly, feel free. This collar can also be added to the other little leech that we did earlier. You'll just want to tie off your wing, the top, a little bit short of where we tied it off before, so you've got room for the collar without crowding the eye. Now you can see that that gives us a nice little bit of flash going right into our pine squirrel collar. Again, this is a really simple fly. Kind of made it a little complicated with that little screw up in the first filming, but this one should show that it's pretty easy, and it's an extremely effective fly. I'm going to be floating the Stillwater River tomorrow, and I'm going to give these things a go. Hopefully they'll do good for me. Hopefully if you tie up some of these, they'll do good for you. Remember, don't get locked in on the colors. Tie them in whatever color you want. Blacks, browns, rust, olive, and natural and purple seem to be the ones that do best for me. I like the purple especially for fishing for kokanee. When they run up out of lakes into the river, that purple seems to be a real good trigger for them. And it's also a good color in the winter. When the light angle is low, that purple for some reason just really seems to shine. But as a everyday, every situation, this black and red can be a real killer on the river. So tie some of these up, give them a go, and until next time, peace, love, and fly fishing.